Ladies and gentlemen, I am Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran, and today we are going to be taking a update on the Ukraine conflict. We are going to be doing something a little bit different that I think you guys will like. We're taking a look at the tactical and strategic map of the country, and I'm going to break down what we're seeing, what's been happening in the last 24 hours. So this is June 14th, and we are going to be taking a look at the Ukraine situation. And we're going to ask ourselves if the Cauldron is closing on Ukrainian armed forces. Let's take a look. So we open it up, and here is, of course, the countrywide tactical map, right? You can see here that Russia has basically completed its withdrawal from Kiev, and we can see on this deployment map that shows the most recent known to civilians Ukrainian and Russian force deployments. I think this is a great summary of the situation, though acknowledge that you say, hey, wow, there's a lot of these forces in reserve. This map's protocol is that if a unit has gone more than something like 30 days without publicly identifying its location, say by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense or Public Affairs, then they're moved back to their headquarters or garrison area. So we can see here that there is a, well, classic front line. Literally, the units are in a line here right along the eastern part of the country, the DNR and LNR as Russia refers to them. But importantly, you can see Russian forces are known to be primarily in this area of the country here. And we've talked about this at some length, that I believe that Russia's ultimate strategic objective, and they finally come out and said it, is actually to establish the DNR and LNR as independent countries, recognize them, and declare victory. In contrast, of course, Ukraine has said they have no intention of surrendering even 1 ounce of what they consider their sovereign territory. And so you end up with heavy fighting in these contested regions. Now, as we've talked about, the civilian population is more pro-Russian in this area than in many other regions of Ukraine, though it's probably fair to say that the population, even in these regions, is not necessarily universally pro-Russian. So if you're familiar with any of my earlier discussions, you know, let's take a look at the tactical map here. You know that this I've talked about as is what I think is the Russians recreating their Cauldron of the Stalingrad, the World War II battle in which German forces were blunted at the city of Stalingrad, and then the Red Army encircled them, cutting them off, starving the elite, I think it was the 5th and 3rd German armies, until they were unable to continue resistance. And it looks like, I believe that that's what the Russian army is going for here. Why do I think that? Well, let's see. We zoom in here, and you can see these arrows represent, it appears to be Russian efforts to advance. So we'll take it back 2 days and look at particularly the top, so the lower wing of the Cauldron, so to speak, the lower wing of the offensive. This is the 12th, and there you go. So you can see that, in fact, we might be wrong. Ukrainian armed forces are actually pushing the Cauldron encirclement back, right? You see also up top, there's no change to the front lines at all in the last 24 hours. If anything, it looks like 2 efforts by the Russians to push south from this north end of the Cauldron have been blunted. So this is actually fairly promising. Now, you may notice that here, this town has been seized in the last 24 hours by Russian armed forces, and certainly not good, but I believe chances are, if the Russians are really going for a Cauldron style effect, to do so properly, they need to, well, keep this area encircled. They don't want to divert their forces to pushing hard into this region. What I think they probably did is what they probably saw, this southern prong of the Cauldron here was probably taking a lot of push from the Ukrainian armed forces. And as those units were being put under tremendous pressure, these units adjacent were probably instructed to begin an offensive push in an effort to divert Ukrainian combat power away from crushing and breaking off this southern prong. So you can see here, they pushed forward, seized this town, baiting the Ukrainians to go on the offensive and not lose this front. However, it's not clear that the Ukrainians actually took the bait, as they definitely narrowed down this front. Now let's zoom in on this southern prong. You can see here that in terms of the actual territory of strategic value here, these little rivers, lakes, there's not much strategic value, but there is this one roadway that sort of weaves its way up. It looks like there may also be some other roads here. So you have this unimproved road, and you have this adjacent roadway that's improved. It kind of leads through to some of these towns. But I think it's fair to say that it appears that pretty much the Ukrainians are in control of, the Russians are in control of basically this one unimproved road, and that this is pretty much what they have left. They can basically defend this roadway and these towns sort of positioned along it. And that's pretty much it, which is really dangerous, right? Because if the Ukrainians are able to ambush, thwart, bomb, destroy this road, then large numbers of the Russian armed forces that are trying to defend this prong are going to have a really hard time defending it. Right? It's like a heart attack, right? If your heart has 6 different ways to get blood into the heart, then the chances of you having a heart attack are very slim. Your heart you're unlikely to have anything catastrophic. But if years of poor eating have narrowed your blood vessels, narrowed the vessels and arteries leading to your heart, so that there's only maybe one artery still feeding your heart cleanly, then it's not going to take much to close that artery and give you a critical heart attack. So this sort of, given the narrowing of Russia's supply arteries to the southern prong, may indicate that this may not persist for much longer, barring some sort of big Russian offensive, which again, we haven't really seen. The only other thing that's worth noting is, I believe there's one other piece of territory. Yeah, just small fighting inside this urban area itself. You could see it's still considered a contested region and block by block fighting. But this looks more as though these forces have traded. The Ukrainians look like they've decided to try to lock in a front line and cede some city blocks to the Russians. This could just be the natural sort of fog of war, different areas being reported, controlled. I'm always suspicious when we get too detailed because, of course, the fog of war is real. You don't always have totally up-to-date information, and you don't always know exactly who is really in control of things as small as city blocks. Okay, moving down south, you can see here that there hasn't really been any other major strategic movement. Yeah, it looks like a couple of small changes in territory in the south as Russia seems to, it's not clear that it's even really seizing territory, because when we look here, we see that whatever they're seizing here, this looks like just agricultural land, not really any strategic value, and I wouldn't take this as some sort of absolute. Low strategic value areas, they're going to change hands all the time because they're basically empty. It's going to be whoever is driving through it on their way to a town, village, or terrain of strategic value. And hopefully you guys are starting to see the larger lesson here, which is not every place in the front line is considered equal, right? It comes down to control of roads and towns. That's what it's about. So Anyway, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this quick update. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more like it. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.